And she often wrote about the fact that she felt that if she hadn't had poetry in her life, then she would have come apart, that it was what grounded her to her life and to her emotions. It was her coping mechanism. And but she also, because it was, that is the way she saw poetry kind of had a sacred position in her life as an artist. She could never not tell the truth in poetry. So there was a point in her life shortly after she came back when she felt her poetry was giving her away. So she stopped writing poetry for a while because people were getting, it was a dark time in her life.
The kind of freedom that was most precious to her, that freedom she found from poetry. She used poetry to discover her broken voice, especially after she came back, after she fell apart in a relationship with her husband. Tell us a little bit about that time, and how did she use poetry to be able to build her new confidence, her new world, her new life?
Yes, that's an excellent question, because poetry was always a huge, a central part of her life. She started writing poetry when she was, she published her first poetry when she was 7. She published her first book of poems when she was 21, and she kept writing poems till the last few weeks of her life. So it was truly her life partner. But she published, when she was in England, she published quite a lot of poetry in English. That was the language that was around. She was steeped in, and it came to her naturally to do that. Once she came back to India, she made a choice not to write in English. And it was a political choice. She talked about it often, not only because her other writers of her generation were rejecting the colonizers' language as the language of their creative work. That was part of it. But in my mother's case, even more so was a fear she had that our regional languages and literatures were going to become extinct unless we held on to them and loved them and cherished them and practiced them in our literature. So that was the reason why she decided to do all of her creative writing in Bangla, although all of her academic work, as you know, she was a very formidable academic, and all of that was in English. So when she came back, the other thing about what you hit on it really perfectly, it was so fundamental to who she was. And she often wrote about the fact that she felt that if she hadn't had poetry in her life, then she would have come apart, that it was what grounded her to her life and to her emotions. It was her coping mechanism. And but she also, because that is the way she saw poetry kind of had a sacred position in her life as an artist. She could never not tell the truth in poetry. So there was a point in her life shortly after she came back when she felt her poetry was giving her away. So she stopped writing poetry for a while because people were getting, it was a dark time in her life. Her marriage was breaking apart. Her father had just died. She had 2 little children. She was going back to a city which at first was not quite ready how to accept this, divorced woman who, when she had left, was this glamorous young academic star. She was still very young, but she had some history, and a painful history that she brought with her this time. So all of that, the disconnect she was feeling, made her poetry very dark.
If you've enjoyed the conversation that you just heard, do subscribe to our channel for much more.